Have you ever thought about a city that, held this huge promise, a place called a paradise for workers, but then just exploded, became what someone called a social volcano?
It's a powerful image.
It really is. Today, we're taking a deep dive into the Haymarket Affair. It's this really pivotal moment in American history, often just boiled down to, well, a bombing, but there's so much more to it.
Absolutely. And for this deep dive, we're leaning heavily on James R. Green's fantastic book, Death in the Haymarket. The story of Chicago, the first labor movement, and the bombing that divided Gilded Age America. It's incredibly detailed.
It really is.
Our goal here is to unpack everything, Cardi. Green lays out the complex forces, the fascinating people involved leading up to May 4th, 1886, and then look at the immediate fallout and how the memory of it all has been so bitterly divided ever since.
So by the end, you should have a really solid grasp, not just of what happened, but why it matters so much then, and honestly, why it still resonates today.
Exactly.
So let's set the scene. Green starts with this kind of surprising image, doesn't he? Chicago in 1865.
Yeah, unified, people grieving together for Lincoln's funeral. He calls it a moment of common front. All races, all backgrounds, just standing in silent grief.
It sounds like a city with so much potential for unity, right? But you mentioned that social volcano. How fast did things change? When did those cracks start to show?
Well, that's the striking thing Green points out. That unity, it was almost immediately challenged by Chicago's absolutely explosive growth after the Civil War.
Right, the boomtown phenomenon.
Oh, completely. Green describes it as insatiable growth. It became the entrepot, the critical link between the East and West. You had these massive industries springing up armor and meatpacking, McCormick's Reaper Works.
And the lumber yards. Green mentions stacks of lumber 30 feet high, just acres of it.
It paints a picture, doesn't it? A city just bursting at the seams with ambition.
And promise, too, at least on the surface. The city boosters were all about it being a paradise for workers and speculators, full of chances for self-made men.
That was the rhetoric, yeah. But Green immediately contrasts that with the reality for most people. You had the pine box shanties, where workers lived crammed together.
While the rich moved out.
Exactly. Retreating to places like tree-lined Washington Boulevard, far away from the filthy, stinking streets. It was Andrew Cameron's tale of two cities. And that growing divide, that stratification, was maybe the first major fracture in that post-war unity Green identifies.
Okay, so in this city of sharp contrasts, early labor movements start to appear. A bit of hope, maybe? Tell us about those first efforts.
Yeah, you see the beginnings of organized labor. People like William Silvis Green describes him as really intelligent, very effective. He built up the Iron Molders Union, made it one of the strongest in the country.
And that led to the 8-hour leagues.
It did. There was real momentum. They even got a law passed in Illinois in 1867, making 8 hours a legal day's work. On paper, that sounds like a huge victory.
It certainly sounds like it. But, uh-oh, I sense a but coming.
You sense, right? This is a key moment. Green highlights early on Chicago's manufacturers. They shut that down fast and brutally.
Yeah.
They formed a united front, just completely resisted it. They talked about reduced output, but also this sacred principle of individual contracts, no collective bargaining, no mandated hours.
And the worker side.
And Andrew Cameron, the labor editor, he was just bitter, called the workers' retreat craven. But it showed the sheer power of the employers when they banded together like that.
So that early defeat must have been a hard lesson.
A profound lesson, Green argues. It showed that legislative change was fragile, easily overturned, and it arguably pushed many in the labor movement towards more radical thinking, towards direct action, instead of relying on laws.
So Chicago's got its own intense struggles brewing, but things weren't happening in isolation, right? What was going on overseas, especially in Paris, that started to feed into American fears.
Right, 1871, at the Paris Commune. American newspapers were fascinated by it initially. This radical, worker-led government takes over Paris after the Franco-Prussian War. At first, some American papers, even in Chicago, sort of saw them as Democrats fighting corruption.
That sounds pretty positive, actually.
It started that way. But Green shows how quickly that narrative flipped, dramatically.
How so?
Newspapers like the Chicago Tribune under Joseph Medill, they just pivoted hard. Suddenly, the Parisians are communists, uncivilized elements. Medill compared them to savage tribes, called them dangerous classes. He even urged them to be mown down.
Wow, so that kind of rhetoric really starts to frame any kind of worker unrest or radical idea as foreign dangerous.
Exactly. It set the stage. Foreign events could ignite this deep-seated fear of radicalism right here at home.
And then, as if the city wasn't doing with enough, it faces its own massive disaster, the Great Fire of 1871.
Yeah, it's a city built of wood. Green calls it long lines of well-laid kindling. Just went up in smoke. And immediately, the search for blame begins.
Mrs. O'Leary's cow. Right, the classic story. Blaming the immigrant, the lower class.
That was the popular one, yeah, blaming the Irish immigrants. But Green points out this other wilder theory, too.
What was that?
This idea of a firebird flying from Paris, carrying the destructive spirit of the commune. Almost like a conspiracy theory.
A firebird. Seriously.
Seriously. Now, Medill at the Tribune, he dismissed that specific rumor, the firebird thing. But he quickly shifted blame anyway, didn't he? Pointing fingers at irresponsible immigrants and bummers who built these pine dwellings.
So still scapegoating the vulnerable.
Absolutely. Green uses it to show how this rising anti-immigrant feeling was always simmering just beneath the surface, ready to flare up another layer of division.
Okay, so we've got class tension, anti-immigrant tension, and then the economy tanks. The panic of 1873.
Yeah, that just throws gasoline on the fire. Banks fail, huge layoffs, wage cuts. You see tramps, unemployed people wandering the streets. It's a desperate situation.
And in that desperation, new groups emerge.
Exactly. German socialists start organizing, demanding the right to work from the city, which, of course, the Tribune dismisses as them being fooled by Karl Marx, arguing against tampering with the immutable laws of our political economy.
But this is also when the IWPA forms in Chicago, right? The International Working People's Association.
Yes, and Green notes what made them significant. They explicitly welcomed women, which wasn't always the case, and they charted their own quite radical course. Distinct from, say, Marx's followers based in New York, they were forging a unique Chicago brand of radicalism.
And these tensions weren't just theoretical arguments in newspapers. They boiled over in 1877.
The Great Railroad Strike. Yeah. It became a violent general strike in Chicago. Police, militia clashing with workers. Green calls it the worst riots the city had endured after the Civil War.
A real turning point.
Definitely. He argues it created class antipathies previously unknown to Americans. This really sharp us versus them feeling took hold. And out of those riots emerges a key figure we'll see again. Captain John Bonfield of the Chicago Police.
Bonfield.
Yeah, he gains this reputation for disciplined brutality. He becomes a symbol of forceful suppression. Remember that name.
Okay, so that's the volatile backdrop. Economic hardship, social division, radical ideas spreading, violent confrontations. Now let's bring in the central figures. Albert and Lucy Parsons, August spies. Tell us about Albert Parsons' path. It's pretty unusual.
It really is. Green traces it meticulously. He starts as a Confederate veteran in Texas, but then after the war he becomes a radical Republican.
Supporting Reconstruction.
Yes, advocating for the political rights of the colored people, as he put it, which, in post-war Texas, got him branded a scalawag, essentially a traitor to the white South.
So how does he get from there to Chicago and socialism?
He moves north, eventually to Chicago, and he later said his conversion to socialism really sped up when he heard Chicago newspaper editors calling for violence against striking workers, specifically calls to throw hand grenades into the ranks of striking sailors. That horrified him.
And his wife, Lucy Parsons, she's just as fascinating.
Absolutely. Her background is debated, possibly Native American, Mexican, maybe African ancestry. But Green notes she chose to identify with proud peoples who had escaped slavery and resisted the European invader. That identity deeply informed her radicalism.
And her partnership with Albert.
Green describes it as having this passion for each other rarely seen in married couples. Their shared commitment, their intellectual partnership, it was a powerful force behind their activism.
You can see how that passion translated. Albert became known as this eloquent American orator. He captivated his German comrades. He even got what Green calls a riot vote in one election, basically. So many people turned out it overwhelmed the polling place.
Yeah, they were making waves. The socialists were on this really ambitious campaign in 1879. It culminated in this huge anniversary rally for the Paris Commune.
Yeah.
Green says 40,000 people showed up.
Yeah.
And they had armed workers' units marching.
Armed units, like militias.
Yeah, German-American socialist groups like the Lehr and Reverberations, the Bohemian sharpshooters. It was a deliberate, powerful reminder of the commune's legacy, its mythical power, as Green puts it.
But despite that show of force, people like Parsons and spies soured on electoral politics.
They did. They basically bolted, as Green says. They came to see running for office as futile. They decided the real power, the real path to change, was organizing workers directly into aggressive unified trade unions.
Focus on the shop floor, not the ballot box.
Exactly.
Hmm.
Tangible gains, worker power.
And August Spies becomes central here. He takes over the socialist newspaper, the Arbeiter Zeitung.
Right, a highly literate German immigrant. He really shapes the voice of the movement. And then another figure arrives who shakes things up. Johann Most.
The notorious firebrand.
That's him, the world's leading anarchist agitator at the time. His speeches were incredibly bombastic, fiery. Green says he definitely galvanized young German socialists like Spies and Michael Schwab.
But did the Chicago anarchists fully buy into Most's ideas, especially about, well, bombs?
That's a crucial distinction Green makes. Most advocated individual acts of terror assassination, bombings. The Chicagoans, while they certainly used bomb talking to scare authorities and talk to big game,
They didn't fully embrace that strategy.
not in the same way. They were generally more aligned with a view closer to Marx's original ideas that real change comes from collective power, organized labor, mass movements, not isolated acts of violence. Their focus remained largely on union building.
So while the rhetoric gets hotter, the main energy is still going into organizing workers who are facing pretty harsh conditions.
Incredibly harsh. This was the era of mechanization's merciless advance, as Green calls it. Think about Armour's meatpacking plants, the mechanized animal kill, McCormick's reaper works, woodworking factories, cigar making.
Machines replacing skilled workers.
Yes, displacing them, de-skilling jobs, allowing employers to slash wages. The Arbeiter Zeitung accused owners of plundering workers. It destroyed old bonds, feelings of solidarity. It became each man for himself.
It really raises that question Green poses. Is this what progress meant?
Right. Is this massive industrial growth worth the human cost? That's the core tension of the Gilded Age right there, and Chicago was ground zero. Perfect conditions for conflict.
And that conflict increasingly centered on the demand for an 8-hour day. Parsons was key here.
Almost single-handed at first, Green says, in reviving that crusade. And crucially, he stressed direct action by workers, not by laws. Learn the lesson from 1867.
And they started seeing results.
There were moments, like a sympathy strike in 1882. German tanners and English-speaking couriers walked out together. The Tribune, surprisingly, called it something new and wonderful. It showed that idea taking hold. An injury to one is the concern of all.
That solidarity must have been powerful.
It led some groups, like the progressive cigar makers, to break away from their national union, which they saw as too conservative, too exclusive. They formed the Central Labor Union, the CLU, which aligned with the anarchist IWPA.
Accusing the other unions of being an aristocracy of labor, that's pretty radical language.
It was, and the anarchists pushed this demand. 8 hours work for 10 hours pay. Not just fewer hours, but for the same pay they got for 10 or 12 hours.
Which would have appealed massively to the lowest paid workers.
Exactly. The common laborers, as Green calls them, who'd endured long hours and stagnant wages for years. They saw this as reclaiming a legitimate right.
The stage was definitely being set, and McCormick's becomes a flashpoint again in 1885.
Yes. Union iron molders strike against wage cuts. McCormick brings in Pinkertons.
The Pinkerton detectives, hated figures in labor circles, especially among the Irish.
Deeply hated. Because of their role in breaking strikes, and especially the Molly Maguire's hangings in Pennsylvania coal country. So when Pinkertons show up at McCormick's, the Irish workers there reacted furiously. There's a violent clash, and the workers actually routed the Pinkertons, drove them off.
That must have sent shockwaves. And it brings two figures into contrast again. Mayor Carter Harrison.
Right. Harrison Green describes him as cosmopolitan, someone who understood the immigrant communities. His philosophy was basically better to let them speak, let them blow off steam, rather than suppress them and create martyrs. He actually read their newspapers.
Did he think they were dangerous?
He apparently said they often talked like damn fools, but he didn't see them as an imminent threat that needed crushing.
But then there's Captain Bonfield.
The complete opposite approach. Bonfield is described as ruthless, determined to disperse crowds with force with that disciplined brutality. You have these two fundamentally different approaches to handling unrest coexisting at the top. It's unstable.
Meanwhile, the anarchists are becoming more visible, more provocative.
Definitely. The IWPA holds this audacious protest right at the dedication of the brand new Board of Trade Building. Parsons gets up and calls it a board of thieves.
And suggested it ought to be blown up. That's pretty inflammatory.
Extremely. They held public marches carrying red flags. They used holidays like the 4th of July to offer their own radical reinterpretation of the Declaration of Independence, arguing for economic freedom, not just political liberty.
And Lucy Parsons is speaking out more, too.
Yeah, gaining prominence. One newspaper reporter dismissively described her as a very determined negress, speaking with her anarchist sucklings, her children beside her, shows the kind of racist and sexist framing they faced.
But beneath all the speeches and the bomb talking used to maybe intimidate authorities, there was a real danger, wasn't there?
There was. Green introduces figures like Louis Ling, a young German carpenter. Ling harbored no illusions about peaceful change. He wasn't just talking about bombs, he was learning how to make them and seemingly prepared to use them. The rhetoric was becoming reality for some.
All of this is just building towards May 1886. May Day arrives, the start of the big push for the 8-hour day.
Thousands of workers across Chicago go on strike. It's seen as a day of huge historical significance. And initially, the demonstrations are largely peaceful, a sense of anticipation, maybe hope.
But that peace doesn't last. May 3rd.
May 3rd. The McCormick Massacre. Police fire on striking workers outside the McCormick plant during a clash with strikebreakers. Several are killed or wounded. August Spies witnesses it.
And his reaction?
Immediate fury. He rushes back to the Arbiter Zeitung office and writes this incredibly inflammatory circular. It famously declared, "Working men, to arms. They killed the poor wretches because they dared ask for the shortening of the hours of labor. To arms we call you, to arms."
That's a shift. From union organizer to revolutionary call.
Absolutely. The tone changes completely. The tension in the city just skyrockets.
Which leads directly to the Haymarket meeting the next night, May 4th. Called specifically to protest the McCormick killings.
Yes, and to keep the 8-hour movement energized. Though, interestingly, Green notes Spies was tired and initially reluctant to even speak. And Parsons was hesitant too, apparently fearing a police setup.
Even Mayor Harrison showed up to observe. What did he find?
He watched for a while, listened to the speeches. He concluded the crowd was peaceable, that nothing looking towards force or violence had been said, and he told the police captain on site, Bonfield, that things seemed okay. Then he left.
But things escalated after he left. Samuel Fielden was speaking.
Yes. Fielden was wrapping up, apparently mentioning premonitions of danger, when suddenly Captain Bonfield marches a large contingent of police, about 180 officers, towards the crowd.
Despite Harrison having said it was okay.
Despite that, Bonfield gives the order, "I command you to immediately and peaceably disperse."
And then?
Chaos. A bomb is thrown from somewhere. The accounts differ on exactly where landing among the police ranks. A massive explosion.
Followed by gunfire.
A hailstorm of bullets, as Green quotes witnesses, mostly from police revolvers, firing wildly in the darkness and confusion. Again, accounts conflict wildly. Police claimed Fielden shot first, or the bomb came from an alley. Civilian witnesses insisted it was a very peaceable meeting until the police arrived, and that police were firing into each other in the panic.
The casualties were devastating.
7 policemen eventually died from the bomb or gunshot wounds. But Green is careful to also detail the civilian casualties, often overlooked. People like Karl Keister, a Bohemian socialist, Big Kruger, an IWPA militant, August Spies' brother Henry, even Sam Fielden himself was wounded. A tragedy all around.
The public reaction must have been intense.
Immediate, overwhelming fury. Green calls it the strangest frenzy. The newspapers like the Tribune, with headlines like "2 more dead heroes," just whipped it up, calls to hang all the anarchists immediately.
And this led to a crackdown.
A massive one. A complete collapse of civil liberties, essentially. Mass arrests, homes searched without warrants, prisoners held incommunicado, basically disappeared into the police stations. Alan Pinkerton's agency was right in the thick of it, helping round people up.
Police terrorism.
That's what one contemporary economist called it. A period of police terrorism. Yet, Mayor Harrison, to his credit, tried to push back a bit. He temporarily banned large assemblies, but publicly rejected the idea that excessive free speech caused the tragedy. He insisted free speech is a jewel. A brave stance in that climate.
But the push for arrests and convictions was unstoppable. The trial that followed, it wasn't exactly a standard murder trial, was it?
Not even close. The grand jury indicted 10 anarchists for murder. But the key issue wasn't proving who threw the bomb. They couldn't. The prosecution's strategy, Green shows, was overtly political.
Oh, so?
They argued conspiracy, that the defendants' speeches, their writings, their anarchist beliefs created an atmosphere that inevitably led to the bombing. Therefore, they were all guilty of murder, even if committed without their specific sanction. They were essentially on trial for being anarchists.
And the jury.
Green details the selection process. It resulted in a packed jury. Jurors openly admitted prejudice against socialists and anarchists, but were seated anyway. The defense challenges were consistently overruled.
What about the evidence linking them to the actual bombing?
Very thin, often contradictory. There's this one witness, Harry Gilmer, who dramatically identified spies as coordinating with the bomb thrower. But his testimony was full of holes, glaring inconsistencies, yet the prosecution relied heavily on it.
Did the accused get to speak?
They did. Fielden, Spies, Parsons, they gave these incredibly eloquent, powerful speeches from the dock. They denied inciting that specific act of violence. Parsons famously tried to reframe dynamite not as just a weapon, but as an emancipator of man, a diffusion of power that could help workers fight back against concentrated capital.
He spoke as more than just an activist.
Oh, yeah. Green describes him speaking as a historian, philosopher, economist, journalist, even a scientist talking about dynamite's chemistry. He declared, "The world is my country, all mankind my countrymen." And his closing was unforgettable. "I hate authority in every form. You, the judge and jury, are being weighed in the balance."
But the verdict was already sealed, wasn't it?
Pretty much. 7 sentenced to death. 1, Oscar Neebe, got 15 years, essentially for being associated with the movement. It was a devastating blow.
This leads into the next phase, the appeals, the clemency campaign. The Supreme Court didn't intervene?
No, they refused jurisdiction. So all hopes rested on the governor of Illinois, Richard Oglesby.
And Albert Parsons' reaction to the clemency pleas?
He took this incredibly principled, perhaps stubborn stance. He refused to ask for mercy. He said, "I am innocent, I appeal, not for mercy, but for justice." He explicitly invoked Patrick Henry. "Give me liberty or give me death."
He confronted the publisher, Melville Stone, didn't he?
He did. Told Stone basically, "Your newspaper's attacks convicted us before the trial even started. My blood is on your head." He was defiant to the end.
But there was a significant movement pushing for clemency, right?
Yes, widespread support.
Yeah.
From labor leaders like Samuel Gompers, who disagreed with anarchism but abhorred the trial. From intellectuals like Henry Damaris Lloyd, William Dean Howells, even big international names, William Morris, Oscar Wilde, Friedrich Engels, they all called for clemency.
What derailed that momentum?
This stunning incident, as Green calls it. 4 bombs, real live bombs, were supposedly found in Louis Ling's jail cell just days before the scheduled execution.
Ling, the one who was actually making bombs.
Exactly. Whether they were smuggled in or planted or what, we don't know for sure, but the discovery instantly poisoned the atmosphere. It seemed to confirm everyone's worst fears about these men. Clemency efforts basically collapsed.
And Ling died shortly after.
Yes, mysteriously died in his cell. Officially, a suicide supposedly detonated a blasting cap in his mouth, but rumors of murder persisted. It just added another layer of tragedy and suspicion.
Which brings us to Black Friday, November 11th, 1887.
The day of the executions. Parsons, Spies, Adolph Fisher, and George Engel were hanged. Lucy Parsons tried to see Albert one last time with their children, but she was denied entry, strip searched, and thrown in a cell herself for protesting.
What was the scene like at the execution?
Green describes Spies as appearing dignified, composed. Parsons had a look of awful reproach and sadness. There's this palpable feeling of relief downtown among the business elite. But among supporters, just utter devastation. People like Joseph Buchanan, Samuel Gompers, their lawyer William Black, they were heartbroken.
The funeral, though, showed the depth of support that remained.
Immense. 10,000 people filed past Parsons' body as he lay in state. The funeral procession was huge, bands playing somber tunes like Annie Laurie, but also the revolutionary anthem La Marseillaise, defiantly marching past the Haymarket site itself.
And Captain Black's eulogy captured that defiance.
He called them men who loved peace, men of gentle instincts, who didn't seek violence but lived for a revolution that would create a new society based on cooperation instead of coercion. A very different picture than the bomb-throwing fiends portrayed in the press.
What was the immediate impact on the labor movement itself?
Significant. Samuel Gompers later said he believed the bomb killed the 8-hour movement for years because it tainted the cause with violence and radicalism in the public mind.
So a setback for broader labor goals.
Definitely. The Knights of Labor, which had been huge and inclusive, went into steep decline, partly because they were associated with the Haymarket defendants. The American Federation of Labor, the AFL, under Gompers, took a much more cautious, pragmatic path, focusing on skilled craft workers, specific contracts, avoiding broad social agitation, more moderate.
And in Chicago itself, a period of repression.
Dissenting voices were largely silenced, Green writes. The city even erected a statue of a policeman in Haymarket Square in 1889, a very clear symbol of who the official heroes of the story were meant to be.
But ironically, some of those police heroes didn't fare so well later.
No, police corruption scandals eventually led to the disgrace and removal of figures like Captain Bonfield and Inspector Shack. Shack was notorious. Green says he wanted to find bombs everywhere and even sent agents, provocateurs to organize fake anarchist groups to justify continued crackdowns.
So the official narrative was being enforced, but the counter-memory persisted.
Tirelessly kept alive by people like Lucy Parsons, Lizzie Holmes, and others. They published things like the autobiographies of the Haymarket martyrs and the life of Albert R. Parsons. Lucy especially faced constant harassment. Remember that determined negress description, but she never stopped advocating for her husband's innocence and anarchist ideals.
And the story resonated far beyond Chicago.
Absolutely. It had a huge international impact. It influenced events like Bloody Sunday in London later in 1887, and particularly in the Spanish anarchist movement, Green Notes, the Martyrs of Chicago, became icons, remembered every year in the iconography of May Day, which of course became International Workers' Day, largely because of Haymarket.
Then comes a major turning point in the official narrative, Governor Altgeld's pardon in 1893.
A truly remarkable act. John Peter Altgeld, the new governor, defied enormous political pressure and pardoned the three surviving defendants, Fielden, Schwab, and Neby.
And he didn't just pardon them, he issued a statement, right?
A very blunt statement. He declared the trial unfair and illegal. He cited the packed jury, the judge's obvious prejudice, the pure fabrication of evidence like Gilmer's testimony. He basically dismantled the entire legal basis for the conviction.
What did he think happened? Who threw the bomb?
Altgeld suggested it was likely an individual acting alone, possibly seeking revenge for years of police brutality going back to the 1877 strike, not part of some grand anarchist conspiracy orchestrated by the defendants.
The backlash against Altgeld must have been fierce.
Vicious. He was attacked as an alien by birth. He was German-born and anarchist at heart. His political career was essentially destroyed. But he defended his actions, not just as justice for the men, but as a defense of American principles. He called it a patriotic love of liberty, fearing that if civil liberties could be violated for immigrants and radicals, they'd eventually be violated for native sons and daughters, too.
A powerful, if costly, stand. And the story didn't just fade away after that.
Not at all. Green shows how Haymarket kept resurfacing throughout the 20th century. It cast a long shadow over the Sacco and Vanzetti trial in the 1920s, another case involving immigrants, radicals, and questionable justice.
And during the Depression, later labor struggles.
Yes, it became a touchstone. Think about the Memorial Day Massacre in 1937, when police fired on striking steelworkers, ironically, right outside the McCormick Works, then called International Harvester. The parallels were unavoidable.
It also entered literature and culture.
Definitely. Howard Fass wrote about Altgeld, Nelson Algren's Chicago. City on the Make vividly captures that history. Algren called Chicago once the most radical of all American cities, but also the most brutal, a city with undried blood on the pavement.
And Studs Terkel, Chicago's great oral historian.
Terkel, yes, the keeper of the city's memory books. He saw Haymarket as one of the most traumatic moments in American labor history and worked to ensure the workers' side wasn't forgotten.
Even surfacing again in the 1960s.
Yeah, the 1968 Democratic National Convention in Chicago, with the clashes between police and protesters, the trial of the Chicago 8, it reignited all that anger against police brutality. And the Weathermen, the radical group, actually bombed the police statue in Haymarket Square twice, explicitly citing Spies and Parsons as heroes.
Wow, so the statue itself became a battleground.
And Green concludes by noting the ongoing struggle, even today, to create a proper worker memorial in Haymarket Square, to contest the official narrative, to fight against what some see as a deliberate amnesia by city officials about this difficult part of their past.
So wrapping this up, it's clear Haymarket wasn't just one explosion. It was this incredibly complex knot of forces, rapid industrial change, immigration, the birth of organized labor, and these fierce fights over power, over rights, over whose voice gets heard.
Absolutely. And you have this enduring split. Were these men martyrs for liberty and labor, or were they murderers who attacked law and order? That division is still palpable when you look back.
You know, Green's account really makes you think. Haymarket was arguably America's first big national scare over something like domestic terrorism, and the response was this immediate clampdown on civil liberties, all in the name of public safety.
A pattern we've seen repeated, unfortunately.
It leaves you wondering, doesn't it? What does this whole saga, the contested memories, the impact on free speech, labor rights, how we view dissent, what does it tell us about that constant balancing act between order and liberty, especially in a society as diverse and dynamic as ours?
And ultimately, maybe it boils down to that question Green implicitly asked throughout the book. Whose history gets remembered? Whose story is told and whose gets deliberately forgotten?